Hey guys, welcome back to Integrated. My name is Angela Erickson, and I'm so glad that you are here today. I recorded this interview with Catherine Rose. She is a homeschooling mother of two. One of her children did pass away, and you'll hear about that a little bit during our interview. But she wrote this book called A Return to Beauty: Ancient Catholic Wisdom in Modern Fashion. And her publisher sent it to me, or I should say publicist, excuse me, sent it to me wanting me to interview Catherine. And I thought, I'm just gonna put all my cards out there for you guys. I saw it, I saw the title, and I thought it's going to be another one of those books that's going to lack nuance. And um I just wasn't really thrilled about this. I just don't like a lot of the modesty discourse because I think it tends to fall rather short. That being said, I said, sure, send me the book. I will read it and I'll let you know how I feel about doing an interview afterward. Fast forward a week or so later, and the publicist followed up with me asking, hey, so what do you think? Do you want to interview her? And I said, yes, but I don't really agree with her on some things, and I just want her to know up front, like, it's not going to be a softball interview. And so that was my intention going into this interview, and I was pretty upfront even when I sat down with Catherine this morning to record. I said, I don't really agree on some points. And I was really grateful to hear some more of her perspective. Um, I honestly, reading it, I did not much care for a lot of what I read. I'm just going to be really honest. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do the Catholic thing and like talk to her, hear her out, and not cast aspersions. And I was so much more impressed interviewing her than I was reading her book. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I think this is such an important conversation, and I'm not opposed to reading things that I disagree with. It's not that I want to live in an echo chamber. Um, I just don't think that this book reflected her intellect. And so that's my criticism of this book. Now, that's, I guess, the root of it. If you listen to our interview and you decide, I'm, I'd like to see it for myself, I say go for it. And I'm going to include a link in the description. You can go buy it, go think for yourself. Which is another reason I'm not sure that I want to add my critique to the end of this. I want you guys to have the space to make that determination for yourself. However, I really enjoyed this interview. I think that she has read a lot. She has a bachelor's in theology that she from the University of Notre Dame, and she worked in the pro life world as a lobbyist. Like, I don't doubt for a second that, especially after talking to her, that she is very bright. And I love that she's very passionate about this topic of how do we dress in a way that is dignifying and properly expresses our nature, our feminine nature. So that's why I'm doing this interview. That's why we're having this conversation. I didn't get into like the things with her about her book that I maybe didn't care so much for. But I did want to get a better idea of like where she's coming from and what her thoughts are. So that's why I am publishing this interview. And I think maybe I'll do a separate stream. The more that I talk about it, I think I'm going to do a separate recording covering her book and diving into it. I don't typically do that, but I do often get requests to do book reviews and stuff like that. And so I think that's what I'll do. It might be interwoven with kind of a broader stream, like this might be a segment of it. Um, but I think that this is a good conversation for people to hear, both men and women, to hear about modesty. And I hope that you guys enjoy this interview. I would love for you to post your comments, what you think about it. And I also will say, too, just kind of for some context as we get to the end of the interview, something happened at the end of the interview. So I kind of had to abruptly cut it short. It was just there was something that came up out of nowhere. And so you might see that, you might wonder like, whoa, okay, that was weird. That's why. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully that never happens again. But that's just how it goes. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to Integrated. If you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, do all the things. If you'd like to support my work, there is a one-time donation link. I stopped doing my Patreon because I wasn't putting out content often enough to warrant ongoing support in that manner. But I still do pay bills on stuff. And I would like to upgrade things like my camera. My camera is a big one. I would like to get a new camera, that kind of thing. And so if I can garner any sort of support that helps offset these costs of upgrading and investing in this podcast, whether it's paying for the subscription to StreamYard to record these interviews or graphic design software, all that stuff that just goes on in the back end, you're more than welcome to check out my website and see if you can give a gift there. So anyway, thank you so much. I hope you like this interview and stay tuned for the upcoming book review. God bless. Welcome to Integrated. This is the podcast where we seek to bridge the gap between the intellect and the will so that we can grow as disciples of Christ, surrendering all that we are and all that we have to the truth. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for coming on to Integrated to talk about your book, A Return to Beauty, Ancient Catholic Wisdom and Modern Fashion. I'm looking at it right here.
I have it right here too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about it. So I guess the first and obvious question is like, what was the thing that made you decide like, I need to write this book about modesty and modern dress?
I did not want to write this book. I felt called, as I say in the book, I felt called in a very unexpected way 14 years ago in adoration to wear only skirts and dresses. And it made, at that time, no sense to me, but I was obedient to it. But I have found over the years that women can feel so defensive because if there's any kind of condemnation for what they're wearing, they get defensive because what we wear as women very much expresses who we are inside. So I did not want to wound anyone. And I just had resolved to live this call personally and quietly and just try to uplift society through what I wore. But my husband 2 years ago began to say to me, Catherine, you need to write this book and write what you've learned. And I said, oh no, like not. And but he kept saying that. And finally I thought maybe this is the Holy Spirit really speaking through my husband and challenging me. So I wrote the first draft with a good deal of fear. And after I wrote that, I felt like my tone was not right. I felt like it was defensive maybe, and I was trying too hard. So I put it away. And then I tried again a few months later and it still wasn't right. So I thought, well, this is just not working. And then a year ago, it came to me very simply. I was alone in prayer and I just heard God say, like, just write it from your heart. So I did. And so as you see, the tone is just very personable. Like I'm not trying to sound scholarly or something. I just want to share what's been my journey. But it's been unexpected because I never thought I would want to write about this.
What has the overall response been? And have you had women reading it? Like, I suppose your intended audience maybe would be women who haven't thought about dressing more modestly, or what I guess, what is the intended audience? Has that been the audience that has been reading your book? And if so, what has the response been? I guess those are three questions rolled into one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's clarify. I think that when we say dressing modestly, that usually means dressing with a lot of fabric. And so that's actually not what this book's about. This book is about elevating society through dressing in a lovely way. And then it does explore what Thomas Aquinas says are the three aspects of modesty, which are very much not about wearing lots of fabric. So first of all, what's my intended audience? It's kind of everyone, because on the one side, we have women like I was in college who don't know what their bodies mean and who are formed by the culture to treat themselves as objects. And so they take on this like hypersexualized way of dressing because that's how they think they have their value. On the other side, in the mom world, I homeschooled my children. In the mom world, there can be this notion that, well, we just dress for comfort and that means pajamas or, sweatpants every day. And so how can we as moms who are exhausted and maybe have been up all night with baby and maybe have postpartum depression. How can we as moms actually help ourselves and elevate our family life through how we dress? And then there's the other class of women, kind of in the Catholic world, who might think that it's bad to be pretty and to think that they just need to cover up. So then to help those women to know what the church really says about feminine beauty and even wearing makeup and dyeing your hair. Thomas Aquinas talks about wearing makeup to cover imperfections and to please your husband. So I wanted to just like share with every woman what I've learned in terms of good news. Remind me what there was something else that you had.
The response. I'm just wondering like how your readers have overall responded to this book, because there are some, certainly quite a few books out there about modesty. I don't know how often they're being read, but there are some out there already. So I was curious what the response has been.
Yeah, well, there are two books out recently in recent years. One is Worthy of Wearing, the other is The Theology of Style. And all of these different books, like some of them focus a lot on the notion that, like, again, that our bodies have value and let's dress in a beautiful way. Then there are some other books I've found from more past years that can be kind of negative and like condemnatory, that pants are bad, and so I wanted my book to be very much a middle way that brought in both the good news of, again, like dressing in a lovely way and the value of the body and Pope John Paul's theology of the body, and the traditional, like really rich teachings of Thomas Aquinas and the popes. I did not even know that the popes ever talked about this. And they very much did up through Pope Pius XI. And then Pope John Paul, who usually he speaks more about the principles and not like really the form of the thing. But even he reinstated the Vatican dress code. So like even he had a notion of, well, here's appropriate fabric dimensions as we look at the value of the body in terms of the theology of the body. So I wanted my book to bring in both sides and show a middle way and not to be too much on one side or the other. So therefore, my audience, the book promptly got like 15 5-star reviews. So there, I think, was a class of women looking for something like this, that was a very positive middle way, but a bit more theologically meaty and dense. I have a couple of friends who, because they love me, read the book, but like were dubious, and that's fair. This is a stretch for a lot of women. And, the church does not right now give normative guidelines for what women wear. So I can't do that either. That's not what I want to do. What I want to share is just, again, my personal journey. And this has felt to me almost like a devotion in some sense, like a way that I have been faithful to God's call, and it's been transformative. So I've had two friends who've read the book sort of just because they love me. And then they have said, well, I was actually really impressed. Your tone was very gentle. You were really balanced. I still think I want to wear pants. And I was like, hey, fair, fair.
Yeah.
But it really meant a lot to me that they were concerned about what they might read and that they were actually impressed. Like that really, really blessed me.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to know that when you open up, especially when it's someone you care about and you love, that they're like,
scary.
oh yeah, oh my goodness, people don't understand sometimes. Like, I think we have this idea that when we're doing any public speaking or writing or anything, the last people we want to read our stuff or hear it are the people closest to us, because it actually is more vulnerable to open up to the people closest to you than to complete strangers, which is so counterintuitive, but it's true, because you're going to have to face those people again. And if you're talking to out into the ether like I do on a podcast, or in writing on the occasional blog post or something, it's like, I don't know who's going to see it, and odds are I'm probably not going to see you. Every once in a while, I'll have someone stop me and say, "Oh, are you Angela Erickson? I listen to your podcast," and I have this compulsion to apologize.
Yes, like
yeah, like I'm so sorry. I've had that too. Oh, I follow you on Twitter. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't apologize. You're following me, so you must like what I have to say. But still, Well, that's really great. I'm glad that you talked about that too, because I think there's a misconception in certain circles of traditionalism in particular, where they feel like they have kind of adopted a lot of fundamentalist and Muslim adjacent ideas about women and dress and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of this stems from. And we have to be able to have a conversation about shame, because this idea about dress, a lot of it is rooted in shame. Like I'll be honest, I don't know if I've talked about it on my podcast before, but I'm sure I've mentioned it here and there. But growing up, I was very much a tomboy, and I know a lot of women who were tomboys. And too, I think of a lot of the people who are struggling with same-sex attraction and things like that.
Yes.
A lot of them and are wearing, women wearing very masculine clothing if they're not going into the transgender stuff even. But of course there's that. But there's a lot of often woundedness that stems from. And so that's another reason I want to be very careful, because I think we just don't know people's histories. And so when we make aspersions as to why they are doing what they are doing, it's not just that we've been inoculated in this culture, but often I think of women who have been sexually assaulted as children or growing up, and they are trying to cover their bodies in a different way or make them less appealing because they don't want to be hurt again. That's, yes, go ahead.
Finish. Well, yeah, because you just covered a lot. So very much true. I, as a little girl, was wounded sexually, and studies show that 1 in 3 women are. So it's super common. And the way that I kind of lived with that was that, of course, you think it's your fault, and there's a devaluing of the body. So then how I devalued my body was to see it as a sexual object.
Right. Which is not uncommon, because that's where you've learned value and connection, right? So
yeah. And then actually Pope John Paul, in his Theology of the Body, he talks about how because of like the wounds in the heart, that in the women's heart, there's a temptation to be a seductress, right? As a source of power.
It is power. Yes.
And when I was in college, when I was a sophomore, I had a big conversion, and I read everything that I could about Pope John Paul. And I read that and I thought, oh, he knows, because like from the wounds in a little girl's heart, then like rage develops and this hatred of men. So
and hatred of self. It's not exclusive, right? Yes.
Yeah. So I both demeaned myself through how I dressed, but also it was power over men. So there are those who then like reject their kind of feminine body because then that's dangerous. They were like targeted and they were groomed. But then there are those who respond by being hypersexualized.
Yes.
And so for me, like as like a little girl, kind of existentially, when that happens, it's like how in Song of Songs it says, "You're a garden and enclosed, my sister, my bride, a sealed fountain." I love that verse. And like existentially, that garden is forced open. Like love is awakened before its own time, as Song of Songs says. And so when I first had my conversion in college, I felt like a lot of shame because I had presented my body like in a sexual way. And I thought, well, like I have a pretty face. Like, what do I do with that? Right? Like that must be a near occasion of sin. So I wore big baggy clothes and no makeup. And I dated a guy who played ultimate frisbee. like just like pretty boho and messy, because that
was the hipster, but they're not anyway
so
I know the type.
When I like felt this call from God to begin to dress like in like a lovely way, but with enough fabric and in only skirts and dresses, for me it was very healing. And over the years I realized, oh, it's like my garden enclosed has been restored. Like there's this sense that my body is me and it's so valuable that when I wear like, ample fabric, like I follow the Vatican dress code, right? So shoulders and upper arms covered, knees covered, chest covered. For me, it's been really healing in terms of that childhood wound and the rediscovering that my body's not like a source of negative shame. Though as Pope John Paul says, there is positive shame, right? So
100%.
When we speak of
appropriate,
shame, we have to like talk about the two.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and in some ways, it's this weird dichotomy, right? It's kind of goes down to the condition of the human soul and our concupiscence, but we have this strange way of living in tension of these two types of shame, right?
Yes.
Where we live in shame of our bodies for whatever reason, because of what's been done to us, things outside of our control. though. But also we often, there's not enough shame in its properly ordered sense.
Like
Where
shamelessness.
yes, there is shamelessness, and
Yeah.
it's weird that we have this tension because they're not meant to be coexisting, right? And that's kind of, I guess, why I have this podcast of Integrated, right? It's like there's this proper integration that has to happen where we see things in a rightly ordered way, where our interior disposition is reflected in an exterior fashion, which
Yes.
is the essence of modesty. And modesty isn't reducible just to dress.
Correct.
And it's so much bigger than that. And sometimes too, I think we get fixated on the externals merely being material
Yes.
and not intellectual, not in how we speak, right? Like brittling the tongue, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
What are your thoughts on that?
well, that's why I don't talk about modest clothes, because people, again, they assume that that's like lots of fabric, even like not very, very pretty clothes. So I like buried the notion of modesty in like chapter 5 or whatever, because I don't want to lead with that. So Aristotle spoke about virtue in the Nicomachean Ethics, and he talks about how virtue is actually the happy life, because when we live in accordance with the good, we really are happiest. So then, of course, Thomas Aquinas took Aristotle and very much showed how it's congruent with Catholic teaching and with the church fathers and sacred scripture. So we have the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. And temperance, I call the Goldilocks virtue, because it's the like, not too much, not too little, just right. So modesty is actually a daughter of the virtue of temperance, which is surprising. It's not prudence, it's not fortitude, it's temperance. And modesty has 3 different forms even. So there's modesty in behavior, modesty in speech, and modesty in personal presentation. Not even just dress, but so Thomas Aquinas says that modesty has 3 different dimensions, whether it's in action, in speech, or in dress. And at first, but in terms of dress, first, I dress for the occasion, so as to honor the host and to honor my fellow guests. And we know this, right? Like if I'm going to a wedding, I dress to honor the occasion. And if I dress too casually, it might seem like an insult. Like I don't take this event seriously and I'm not honoring what's happening here.
Or if you dress in white and you're not the bride, right? Like those are like, I mean, it's even something like that. Like there are unspoken customs. You talk about that as customs, as Aristotle says, is like unwritten law. And we kind of intuitively know, like it would be wildly inappropriate to wear a big white gown to a wedding if you're not the bride, right?
Yeah. So we dress for the occasion, and also we dress for our station, which, our culture has been very formed by the French Revolution and this false notion of equality, right? Equality in classical terms was that each of us has dignity that's like, but some have more glory than others because of their station. If God has made you the king, there is more glory endemic to your station, in terms of like, you wear these robes of state, you have these, you have authority to do these things, to levy taxes, to call up the army, so that you would very much act and dress for your station. Whereas if I'm the fishmonger's wife, I dress for a messy job. And so I can have clothes that are more casual, perhaps of tougher material, but I still am dignified in what I'm doing. But in our American culture, we're so formed by the French false notion of equality means that we're all the same. So it tends to make everyone more casual, because we all kind of have this like gender neutral, casual vibe.
And we've reduced station, right? Like especially in a more communist society, which is what we have embraced, is everybody's the same. Everybody should just pay the same amount. And we all just disperse our money, and you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, kind of a mindset. And it is expressed in how we dress too. And I agree with you. This degradation of the feminine, coincides very closely with the French Revolution, the sexual revolution, all these different revolutions over time.
Well, and the French Revolution was the first time that the word communism was used, which is fascinating. That idea actually originated from the French Revolution, and then Marx took it up eventually, and that became Marxism. But I chose to be a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I was a pro-life lobbyist before. So to know, well, like, what's my station now? Because society does not really honor full-time motherhood.
No, it doesn't.
So I had to figure out, well, like, what's a proper way to dress to honor my station? So at mom events, usually I would end up looking overdressed. But at like a park play date, I'd be in a cute sundress and the only one wearing like not yoga pants and shorts. And I had all these great friends. I loved them. But I just felt like, well, let's elevate what's happening here. Like this is moms with their children. We're building culture, right? We're educating these future leaders of society. And also our station as wives and mothers is really important. So I dressed for what I thought was the importance of my station. And then the third aspect of modesty is that I dress so as to honor myself, my interior value, and the value of my body. So that's where I don't wear too much fabric, but also I don't wear too little fabric. I don't want to be in a burqa. I don't want to be in like a messy Amish, baggy t-shirt, long denim skirt, Crocs. I have a thing against long denim skirts.
They're not very flattering, let's be honest. And it's so funny because it is part of the like in certain communities like Baptists and things like that. And nothing against Baptists with regard to dress or anything, but you said you can look and know, okay, they're Baptist because they've got the long denim skirt on and it's not very flattering. And yeah, I remember when I got my first, it wasn't even it was longer, and so far it was closer to a midi denim skirt. And I was like, my sister looked at me and she goes, well, you really look the part now, referring to me homeschooling. I was like, I feel like I look the part.
Well, it has been trendy. Like last fall, it was very trendy to have denim midi skirts, but that's like high fashion. And it is difficult to make it look intentional.
And they're usually high-waisted too. Like the ones that I tend to like A-line skirts and dresses. That's what I found to be the most flattering for my body type. And that's a whole nother thing. But yes, I mean, it's not like I was wearing the really long, baggy denim skirts. But again, it's like you associate that. You build these associations and it tells you about that person.
Yes.
And I mean, we just generally make assumptions about people, and right or wrong. There are stereotypes for a reason, right? We're kind of used to identifying our in-group and our out-group. And it's a protective mechanism, right? It's not inherently bad, I don't think, to do that. But that's the reality. Our dress does say something about us.
Yeah. In fact, studies show that in the first 7 seconds, your brain has already made a bunch of assumptions about someone. It already decided if they're safe or unsafe.
Yeah.
And then the brain actually, in like then ongoing relationship with this person, tends to like look for things that validate that initial assumption. And until then something really like contrary happens, the brain will hold on to the fact that this person is safe or unsafe. And so people with me, oftentimes they don't know where to place me. It's like, oh, you're just a mom, but you're dressed like so nicely. And then people have asked like, oh, do you have a job? It's like, well, yeah, I have a job. I'm a full-time homeschool mom. Oh, well, that doesn't really count, right? So
yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness, you have no idea.
Correct.
I mean, I told you before we got started, I have 6 kids and right now I'm in the throes of teaching them all how to read. And that is like one of the hardest stages, I think, of homeschooling is teaching your kids how to read. And I'm doing it with multiples somehow. So praise be to God. I'm like ready to be out of this stage though of homeschooling.
But I will say that I actually treasured that time the most because once they get to be 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, they're ready to have peers. It became a lot more work to schedule social time. That is the hardest thing about homeschoolers. And there's so much more social support now. There's co-ops and things, but then you're in the car a lot. So, I was blessed only with 2, so it's different. But we used to go to the library and we'd get like 30 books. And my son Edmund, when he was 3, would call it a book storm. We would come home and we'd have a book storm and we'd make hot cocoa and like sit on the sofa and just read aloud for hours. Sweet. And I really miss that time.
I guess that I would like to pivot and talk a little bit about how did Edith Stein and Alice von Hildebrand impact your intellectual formation with regards to how to dress?
Wow. Well, so again, in college, I met Pope John Paul, and he was the first priest to ever say to me through his writings, like, you can be a saint and you're made to be a saint and you are good. So I just like deep deep dove into all of his writings, but he's a man.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful. So then after college, I got a job doing pro-life work. I was the director for Kentucky Catholic Conference of Bishops. I was the director of their statewide pro-life outreach. And during my lunch hour, I would read The Privilege of, or no, that's Alice von Hildebrand. I would read Essays on Woman by Edith Stein. And I just would go through a few pages at a time, and my mind would be exploding because she speaks with a specifically feminine voice about woman's, and she was a phenomenologist like Pope John Paul, so about like the interior experience of being a woman. Because, you know, I had this childhood wound, and so I had this rage inside, and then that was corroborated by like the Marxist feminist vibe that I picked up in college. And even though I was a devout Catholic, it's like in the air you breathe.
You just, you don't even realize it until you step outside of it. I mean,
Right.
And even in the pro-life movement, I mean, let's be real. There's a lot of feminism in the pro-life movement. That's a whole nother topic. And I'm going to be talking to Carrie Gress a little bit about that in the upcoming months. But I mean, it's there. It's in the air we breathe. I totally agree.
And it is this rage. So when I began to read Edith Stein, it's like she answers that. And she talks about the strength of woman. You know, Pope John Paul talked about the feminine genius, but he very much kind of got it from her, or perhaps she inspired him. So for me, it answered all these questions about, well, who am I inside? And is it weakness? Is it weakness to be, of course, physically weaker than men? Even if I do CrossFit, like every day, my muscles and my bones are never going to be as strong as men. Mm-hmm. But also, like, you know, I'm more emotionally volatile than my husband, and I like take things more deeply. So I'm, of course, I think, okay. So Edith Stein talks about how every woman, by virtue of having her feminine body, also has a feminine soul. And this echoes Thomas Aquinas, because Thomas Aquinas said, right, anima forma corpus. The soul is the form of the body. And in that classical language, form meant like blueprint, or it meant the structure around which the thing is built. Mm-hmm. So we can
We've kind of inverted that.
Correct.
Yes.
But we can learn about what our souls are through looking at our bodies, right? Like kind of like going backwards. Yep. So Edith Stein says, well, if I have a womb and I have these breasts to nurture new life, well, that's also what my soul is. Mm-hmm. And she talks about the like soul of a woman, and she talks about how Mary, of course, was the ideal woman's soul, so that there's this like list of characteristics that Mary's soul had. And when I used to pray the rosary, and I would pray every rosary for this, like that I could have a soul that is dark, that is warm, that is silent, that is safe, that is pure, because that's what the soul of Mary was, Edith Stein said. So Edith Stein's writings taught me to not be afraid to be feminine, like to not be afraid to be soft. I don't have to always be like challenging men in a masculine way, but that I can very much have power in some sense through embracing who God made me to be. That's actually the most deeply transformative for the world, is if I own the feminine. So then in terms of how I dressed, like I wasn't there yet. That was in 2009. And it was not till 2012 that I kind of received this call. So at that time, I wasn't thinking about what I was wearing. I mean, I wanted to be modest. And the Catechism, you know, has that quote that modesty covers the intimate part of the person. It's not like very concrete in terms of fabric. So I was kind of just trying to figure out, well, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, some of us like having an outline, you know? Yeah, I mean, I do too. I'm kind of type A in that way. I'm like, I really like clear expectations. Yeah. I just want clear expectations. And that's why I tend to be pretty direct with people, and people misconstrue that sometimes as me being like abrasive. It's like, no, I just really appreciate clarity in a world that is very confused.
Yeah, but for me, it was like again, like really interiorly transformative from the childhood wounds, and also from the osmosis infusion of Marxist feminism, like learning that it's okay. But I do want to speak briefly about feminine characteristics, because Edith Stein says that, again, every woman, by virtue of having this body and this soul, is a woman, but that there is like a spectrum, she says, of kind of feminine characteristics. and if we, and like that's gender. That's like what our world calls gender. That like the gender of being a woman is that you like to sew and you like babies and you love to bake and you speak with like a high voice or
Right.
whatever. And she says, no, like not every woman loves babies. And that some
No,
women,
yeah.
some
Hmm.
women might have like fewer like kind of classically feminine characteristics and be like more masculine, like broad shouldered and have like a deeper voice. Like you think about Margaret Thatcher, right? She had like a deeper voice, but she's still a woman. And I think
Right. Hmm.
I think in our day there's like a lot of confusion. Right? Like we can like speak about transgenderism. There's like
Yes.
confusion that if I'm a tomboy, or you know, I have a goddaughter who has always kind of struggled. She's on the spectrum. She never like really felt like she fit in. She's very thin chested, and she turned 18 and left home, and against her parents' very much you know, wishes, and they like sought to kind of work with her, and she's changed her body. She's had, you know, gender mutilation surgery.
That's tragic.
Because if we equate masculine or feminine with these characteristics, well, then we can think, well, I'm not feminine enough. I must be a man.
We've reduced what
Yeah,
this, and we've narrowed what it actually means to be feminine and
correct.
what it means to be a woman. Yes,
Yep.
I think that's a huge part of this problem. And it's so funny to me that these people who spout this gender nonsense ideology, and it has so many victims lying in its wake, which is what is so evil about it. But they'll say that gender is socially constructed. It's like, you have constructed it in such a narrow way that any woman, like I played sports, I played football every day as a child. I skateboarded, I snowboarded. I would beg my mom to buy me the same pair of cargo zip off shorts from Walmart that my brother got. And we were like the same age, you know? And of course, this was before I hit puberty. And so I think that is, you know, there's like nuance here, right? My mom wasn't buying me the same pants for my brother when I was, you know, in high school or whatever. And it's funny because
you had hips.
Well, yeah. And too, I think also hitting puberty and things like that, there's a natural self-awakening where you come to this this self-actualization of like, oh, I'm different. You know, like I remember the first time I was playing football with my brother and one of his friends. We're like just two on one, like switching who was on the team, whatever. We're playing, and his friend like checked me. He didn't actually tackle me, but he checked me hard. And it was probably 7th grade or something, maybe 8th grade. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, these guys are like way stronger than they used to be, you know, and it hurt. And it was the first time I realized like, oh, we're like different, you know, like intellectually I knew that, but it was this experience where it hit me hard, literally, that, yeah, like I can't tackle someone his size anymore, you know, it's not going to work. And like, and then by the end of high school, I was wearing dresses and skirts. It was very shocking for a lot of people. And sometimes I relished how shocked people were, you know, I liked surprising them. There was something, it felt good to shock people at that, you know, at that age when you're not really thinking about why it's shocking or whatever. But anyway, I think there's this telos that we sort of overlook, right? And it sounds like Edith Stein was really pointing to that, and there are variations even within our own bodies and our own expressions of that, right? And so there is this tendency to reduce what it means to be feminine and how it means to look feminine, right?
Well, yeah, and you know, like actually for those who are feminists, it actually they've also betrayed their own message, because growing
100%.
up we were told, girls, you can do anything that boys can do, and
anything you can do, I can do better.
Well, correct, because every Disney movie, and I can like sing all the songs, I can still sing you Look at Me, you know, like every Disney,
or like Mulan, you know, I love Mulan, but yeah, Mulan is like mega feminist.
Yes, so there was no notion that you had to be soft and gentle to be feminine. It was like, but now in our culture, we're equating feminine with these characteristics. So if you don't have them, well, actually you must be a man inside. Right. So it's like, wait, like I can't be a woman and like playing basketball, or I can't be a woman and like hunting. You know, I live in East Texas, where like a lot of the women here, they're tough, and they hunt next to their brothers, and they go to the rodeo,
Oh
And
yeah, we do
I mean,
too. Yeah,
yeah.
my family,
So
my husband's family are dairy farmers,
yes,
it's not for the faint of heart.
yeah. I mean, I built a cow before, so it's an utter reduction. And but also when Pope John Paul came out with Mulieris Dignitatem, and he talked about the
Great.
feminine genius, and he said
Hmm.
the feminine genius is for every woman, regardless of her mannerisms or her feminine characteristics. Like she has this always appreciation for the person and the personal aspect of the situation. Well, there was an article from like a liberal Catholic magazine that chose to reduce what Pope John Paul said about the feminine genius, and they
Hmm.
said, "Oh, he's just saying that women are meant to serve others, and that women are just made for serving, and that's so offensive." So they just like blew it off. But it's like,
Hmm.
well, no, like no matter what I do, like I have a friend whose daughter, she like does construction and she loves it, but she also like comes home and then does like her mom's nails, like she loves doing gel nails. So
Hmm.
so we like have to recognize that whatever I do as a woman, I'm always going to see the personal aspect of it more, which is why Josephine, my daughter, I talk about in the book how she died of terminal leukemia.
Yeah.
And we loved her oncologist, Dr. John. He was male. He was so good, but he was always thinking more about the symptoms, right? Of course, because that's how his male brain is made. It's always like thinking about the problem and how I'm going to solve it. And of course, with like women, we can solve problems, but we always also like see the person behind it. So,
Hmm.
so then Josephine's other doctor was Dr. Naomi Winnick, white hair. She was like so wise. She was a matriarch. And I talk about in the book how Josephine, 2 weeks before she died, her pain exploded all of a sudden. Went to the hospital and she had to be put on Dilaudid. And we were all pretty frazzled. I've been up with her all night. I was exhausted. She was visibly like barely keeping it together. And in walks Naomi Winnick, and she's like wearing this purple velvet dress with her crown of white hair. And it was all like, we all sighed, like, oh, the mother is here, right? Who she saw me, first of all, and she saw Josephine as a person. Like, and so she spoke to like also to Josephine's emotional state. Like, it's okay,
Right.
sweetie, you're safe. We're gonna get this under control. And then that night in the hospital, Josephine finally fell asleep, first time in 24 hours.
Mm.
And I was like just like sitting trying to breathe and drinking tea. And she came to find me. And she said, "How are you doing, Mom? How are you holding up?" So that's the feminine is it's always like seeing the person,
Hmm.
regardless of if I have a high voice or like a low voice.
Right.
It's the womanly heart.
Right. And that's the nurturing, right? That's the nurturing coming out and that connection that we are so ordered towards. I mean, um, yeah, I think that is so important. I'm glad that you shared that. Do you have any like final thoughts? Like what would you like to see come out of um how do I want to phrase this, I guess? When you look at the culture today, what's the broader impact you would like to see your book have, and what direction do you think that we are moving as a culture toward? Are we moving closer to modesty? Do you think this book is kind of hitting right on the cusp of a transition in our culture, or do you feel like we're going the opposite direction? We're straying further and further every day.
Oh my word. So first of all, culture is one of my like other just absolute loves, and what's happening with our culture and like what makes a culture. So Thomas Aquinas in one of his works, I think it's De Regium, but don't quote me. He says that the necessity for a unified culture is reasonable dialogue. And that comes only from a unified view of the human person. That if I think you're an embodied soul and I'm an embodied soul, and we're both wounded by concupiscence, but we're both striving to become transformed in Christ and seeking the good, that we can have like a reasonable conversation, even if we disagree,
Right.
but we can agree upon formal law and also divine law in the Ten Commandments and natural law. He says, though, once that breakdown of mutual view of persons happens, that then people fall into tribes, first of all. And
Yeah.
that's where we are. I have my
That's
tribe, you have your
100%.
tribe. Who do I follow on social media? Who do you follow?
I was gonna say we are so uncivilized. It's like it's so funny to me because Christendom in the West
Yeah.
really civilized man in a lot of ways. I mean, of course, you have the ancient Greeks and Romans, but they were still pretty uncivilized. I mean, they're gladiatorial games. They were brutal. They were just brutal, torturing people, things like that. And it was Christianity that rehumanized and got people connected to this understanding of the higher good, God, in his true sense, and how that relates to us as human beings, being incarnate souls, right? Incarnate spirits.
Totally.
And as soon as you step away from God, you see the de-evolution begin. And I agree with you. It's exactly where we are. That's what we've seen over the last several years at a rapid pace, but of course, exceptionally clearly over the last couple of weeks with these assassinations and murders of children. It is now, we are back to this tribalism that was so prevalent when the first explorers came to America and civilized Native Americans.
But actually, Thomas Aquinas says further, from tribalism, you devolve into anarchy, because then the tribes start fighting. And I think that's where we are now, or we're on the cusp of it.
Yeah.
We're now, someone who does not like Charlie Kirk just takes him out, right? Because he has a gun and Charlie Kirk doesn't have a gun. That's what anarchy is. So I think we're headed there. So then how does clothing fit in? Well, first of all, the most important thing to do for our society is to evangelize it, because what's at the heart of every person is a hunger for Jesus Christ. But beyond that, as women, we can elevate society through beauty. Beauty is oftentimes a way into the truth, because it's not confrontational, right? People are being drawn to the mass, especially like masses that are really reverent, with the 6 candles and the incense and the chant. Why? Because they're starved for beauty. Our world is so disordered and so ugly. Mm-hmm. So beauty, especially also as women, it's inviting, it's softening a very dark world. So my hope, therefore, with this book is to invite each woman to consider being intentionally lovely and feminine in a world that's confused about what it means to be woman, period. That's also confused about what it means to be human. And so we can very much transform society, I think, through dressing in an overtly feminine, lovely way.
How about you tell people where they are able to find your book, if this conversation has piqued their interest?
Okay, so if you want to learn more about all of this, if you want to actually read what the popes have said about feminine dress and what's like the true meaning of beauty, and also to learn that it's not vain to wear lipstick and not to be like afraid to be beautiful, here's the book. It is on Amazon, A Return to Beauty. It has like 16 reviews. I think it's 4.9 stars right now. So that is exciting. It actually was a new bestseller its first week. So, get this book for your goddaughters, for your granddaughters, for your sisters, and let's talk about how we as women can really uplift society and uplift the family through beauty. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining today. And like I said, I'm really grateful that we were able to have this conversation, because I think it's a really important conversation that often people are afraid to have. I've heard other podcasters, really big ones, say like, oh, I feel like I shouldn't say anything about this because I'm a man, for example.
Right.
And that's just not a good reason. That's the same logic of like, well, no uterus, no opinion on abortion. And I just don't buy that. But in the event that these men are not willing to talk about it in a nuanced way, then I guess we will need to have the conversation. So thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me. This was really fun.